Peace, bruh. Donald Trump brought peace to the Middle East again in the form of massive economic investment. But man, he left Saudi Arabia with a whole bunch of new bros. It was one of the most exciting trips any president has ever taken to Saudi Arabia. And President Donald Trump had the warmest welcome and walked away with the most money, the most investment, and really the most friendship of any president of the United States, I think, ever. In fact, I don't remember ever having a president of the United States go to Saudi Arabia with such pomp and circumstance and success as President Donald Trump had on his trip to meet the Crown Prince. And President Donald Trump said, look, this is the turning point. This is the turnaround. We are going to make the Middle East great again. Mega.
Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that.
Look at this. It's capitalism, not chaos. Technology, not terrorism. Living together, building together, not bombing each other. This is President Donald Trump's plan for the Middle East. This is how he plans on getting things done. He's going to invest in Gaza. He's going to invest in the Gulf states. He's going to invest in all of these places. He's going to, in the process, make a lot of money for the United States of America and also bring peace to a region that for hundreds of thousands of years has not been peaceful at all. And we know he can do it because he did it before with the Abraham Accords, and he thanked those Gulf states earlier who helped him in his first administration.
At the end of my first term, all of the momentum in this region was toward peace. I especially want to thank and congratulate the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain for their vision and courage in signing the historic Abraham Accords. It was something that's a very big thing. I believe we would have had it filled out had the election been called fairly, which it wasn't. It was a rigged election. I hope that in the near future we can continue that progress. We have a mandate from the American people, the likes of which people haven't seen for 129 years. They say it was the most consequential election in America in 129 years. So that sounds like a long time, so we'll take that. But in the future, we'll continue that progress by adding more countries to the Abraham Accords. We have the 4, and I think they're going to be filling up very rapidly.
Imagine being the interpreter for President Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia, having to interpret the rigged election talk and the other comments about how, hey, we've had the best presidency in 129 years. We'll take that. By the way, it was nice to see President Donald Trump with his full cabinet almost. You had Scott Bessent to his right, Marco Rubio, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to his left. It was really a show of force from the United States of America, and that's why Donald Trump truly believes that he will be bringing peace to the Middle East again.
As I said in my address last night, the Gulf nations are at the forefront of creating a stable, peaceful, and prosperous Middle East, and I have to say that I've seen such progress. It's really incredible. I've also seen great unity and friendships. I've spent a little time with you just before this, and I've seen tremendous unity, tremendous friendship, and the whole world is watching the Middle East, and many are watching with envy. You have something very special going on.
And that is something that President Donald Trump wants to bring to more and more countries. He wants to rebuild all of the sections of the Middle East that have been devastated by war and by destruction and by terrorism. And of course, he relayed his Gaza plan once again to take over Gaza, to level Gaza, to rebuild Gaza, and turn Gaza into a thriving metropolitan community, a tourist destination, a place where there's economic growth and technological development and investment from all of the richest people all over the world.
In Gaza, my administration shares the hope of so many in this region for future of safety and dignity of the Palestinian people. But that cannot happen as long as Gaza's leaders take delight in raping, torturing, and murdering innocent people. Can't have it. I greatly appreciate the constructive role that the leaders in this room have played in trying to bring the terrible conflict to an end, including by helping secure the release of American hostage Idan Alexander. It was a big day yesterday, a very important day. I was told just before I left that they were going to be releasing Idan. We thought Idan was dead. 3 weeks ago, they said Idan was no longer living. And it was a very, very good thing. Ultimately,
and that is President Donald Trump. I mean, when you think about the timing of all of this, President Donald Trump heads to Saudi Arabia to make a deal with the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince. While he's there, he talks about all of the other investment he's going to be making, not just in Gaza, but in places like Lebanon. And that's something that could rancor and roil the Israelis. But what happens? A hostage is released just before. It's a monumental amount of winning. It's just winning over and over again for President Donald Trump on this trip to the Middle East. And when President Donald Trump wins, America wins. And when America wins, the world wins. And Lebanon, which, Beirut for a while there had about a decade and a half of peace and prosperity and growth. And then, of course, that all went to pot. But now Donald Trump says we're not just going to stop with Israel. We're not just going to stop with Gaza. We want every single nation in the Middle East to be peaceful and prosperous.
But this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to forge a Lebanon that is prosperous and at peace with its neighbors. And I think things can really happen there.
And the only way it could happen is if President Donald Trump gets involved and if Saudi Arabia and all these other countries put pressure on Iran to stop what they're doing. Iran must stop it all. They must stop the battling. They must stop the wars. They must stop attacking people. They must stop funding. They must stop funding the Houthis and bombing ships in the Red Sea.
I want to make a deal with Iran. I want to do something if it's possible. But for that to happen, it must stop sponsoring terror, halt its bloody proxy wars, and permanently and verifiably cease its pursuit of nuclear weapons. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. I don't imagine there's anybody at this table or anybody in this room that would say they can. I'm strongly urging all nations to join us in fully and totally enforcing the sanctions that I just placed on Iran, and we also placed secondary sanctions, which are in certain ways even more devastating. Iran, as you know, had no money when I left office. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. There was no attack. There was no thought of attack. There would have been no attack if I were president.
And President Donald Trump is saying, look, we're going to make a deal with you or we're going to bankrupt you. We're going to make a deal with you or we're going to push you back into the Middle Ages again. We're going to make a deal with you. You're going to stop bombing people. You're going to stop funding terrorists. You're going to stop funding proxy wars. And you'll be able to live happily ever after. Not just happily ever after, but again, in a thriving place. Donald Trump says, I love the people of Iran. Iran is a country that should be way better than it is. But they're hell-bent on destruction, and whenever they get a little bit of cash, they spend it on stupid stuff like bombs and missiles and Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas and all this other junk. And we're not going to allow that. They can never have a nuclear weapon for that reason, and they're not even going to have a country unless they come to the table. What President Donald Trump is doing is he's trading prosperity for peace. End the wars, end the killing, end the battles, end the funding of terrorists, get rid of ISIS, get rid of ISIS-K, get rid of Hamas, get rid of all of these people. And in return, there will be massive investment. Investment from the United States, investment from the EU, investment from the UAE, investment from Saudi Arabia, investment probably from Russia and China. It's going to be every single massively wealthy country in the world investing in the places that are now hell-bent on destruction of others. You can have peace or you can have prosperity. I'm sorry, you can have peace and you can have prosperity. But it's a deal. It's a couple. They come together. If there's no peace, there's no prosperity. That's how these things roll. Which brought us to Syria. And President Donald Trump, he made a surprise announcement about Syria while he was in the Middle East, which I don't think a lot of people were planning on him to make. But man, it was a very popular announcement about Syria.
We will be dropping all of the sanctions on Syria, which I think really is going to be a good thing. And we made a speech last night, and that was the thing that got the biggest applause from the room. We had a very crowded room with thousands of people, and the statement that got the biggest applause was dropping the sanctions on Syria. Yeah,
it was a big crowd pleaser for sure. In fact, we have here the clip of President Donald Trump making the speech and announcing the sanctions. And yeah, you can hear everybody was thrilled.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
I mean, that is a lot of applause. That is a big line. President Donald Trump dropping the sanctions on Syria to give them a chance at greatness. President Donald Trump knew, again, that prosperity is a good bribe. And if we drop the sanctions and we give you the opportunity to build up an economy and build up a country and build up some wealth, then we want peace in return. And that means clearing out all of the terrorist organizations and all of the evil deed doers that you have in your country. It wasn't just, by the way, it wasn't just in Saudi Arabia where they were applauding. Look what happened in Syria. They were in the streets. They were honking. They were celebrating. They were thrilled. People were out there chanting for their future because President Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia with the Crown Prince said, look, we're dropping the sanctions. We're going to allow Syria to continue to grow as long as they don't spend their money on stupid stuff like killing other people. And this was... this was one of the most successful trips I think that any president has ever had. I don't even know just to the Middle East or anywhere. And what President Donald Trump did after that was he took Sean Hannity on his plane and he did a one-on-one interview. He did a one-on-one interview where Sean Hannity rolled through pretty much the gamut of all the popular topics. And President Donald Trump said, yeah, look, this is how it goes.
There won't be a nuclear battle. Let me just explain. I'm all for Iran. I want them to have a wonderful country and make a lot of money. They have great oil reserves. But if you remember, when I was president, Iran was broke because I placed secondary sanctions, meaning you couldn't buy, if you bought oil, you couldn't deal with the United States. And people make a lot of money dealing with the United States. So basically, they weren't selling any oil to almost anybody. It was down to a trickle, almost nothing. And by the time it all came about, after a couple of years, they had no money. And they didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. They didn't have any money at all. And we had no threat. And when Biden came in, he took off the sanctions and he let them get very rich. And now they have $350 billion or more, which is a tremendous amount. They made great wealth. With oil, you make great money, great wealth quickly. And they have tremendous oil and tremendous reserves. And Biden freed them up from what I did.
Yeah, Donald Trump said, look, I bankrupted them. I made it so that they couldn't invest in any terrorism. And Joe Biden turned around and gave them $350 billion because he allowed them to sell oil to, well, pretty much everybody. And with oil, you make a lot of money pretty quickly. It's the same thing with China. When the tariffs went up on China, China started to feel the economic pinch. And when people don't have money, when they feel the economic pinch, they come to the table and they start negotiating.
One of the things I think that could be most exciting for us and also for China is that we're trying to open up China. Because as you know, many years ago, we opened up the USA. Now it's time for China to open up. And that's part of our deal. And we're going to open up China. To me, that's the most exciting part. But yeah, we made a deal. The relationship is very good. I've always had a good relationship with President Xi. It was interrupted because of COVID, obviously. But outside of that, I've always had a great relationship, a lot of respect for him. And we'll see how that all works out. But we have the confines of a very, very strong deal with China. But the most exciting part of the deal, it was mentioned, but we don't talk about it yet. That's the opening up of China to U.S. business. And that would be like opening up a whole new world. And I think it would be even better for China.
And what Donald Trump means by opening up China to American business is that we can sell things in China we can buy things from China. China's allowed to import whatever they want, but we are not allowed to sell certain things in their country. We're not allowed, they have their own electric vehicles, so we don't sell a lot of electric vehicles to them. They have their own cars, so we don't sell any cars to China. What China has done is they've closed off imports of certain various products from the United States so that we can't sell them there and so that they get 100% of the profit from those popular items. And Donald Trump said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. If you want to be able to sell in the United States of America, which they do because we're their number one consumer of all their stuff, then you've got to open up China. And Donald Trump says that's the crux of the deal, and that's what's really important, and that's what's going to boost. I mean, that's going to change it's going to be life-altering for everybody.
Well, I've been busy, but I've enjoyed it because we're getting things accomplished. We're getting things done. You know, you can have times when you're working very hard and not getting things done. That happens too. But we're getting a lot done. I don't think there's ever been a little period like this with the potential nuclear war. And two countries, they have very good leaders, people I know very well. And, you know, it was a very important process. We got involved with India and Pakistan.
That was a little out of context. But the other thing that came up when you talk about all of these deals and all of the respect that President Donald Trump is getting from all of these nations all over the world was the plane from Qatar, the Qatari jet that everybody is just flipping out over. Donald Trump should not be accepting a plane from Qatar. Donald Trump is on the take from Qatar. Qatar's going to come back and they're going to demand some kind of reciprocity. And President Donald Trump repeatedly saying, I'm not taking the plane from Qatar. It's a gift to the United States of America. It's a gift to the Defense Department, and they're going to use it as Air Force One because, quite frankly, Boeing ain't doing what we're paying them for.
I thought it was a beautiful gesture. Now, there are those that say we shouldn't be accepting gifts to the Defense Department, and I would say only a stupid person would say that. Why wouldn't we do that? And so it helps us out because we'll have a relatively new plane instead of having 40-year-old planes. These planes are 40 years old, and that's not representative of our country.
And that is something that President Donald Trump speaks about. And, you know, President Donald Trump, as a social media star, as a television star, as somebody who's powerful and wants to convey power, President Donald Trump understands the importance of image. He understands the importance of what your image can convey. When you show up to an agreement, when you show up in someone else's country, you want them to think that you are way more powerful, or at least as powerful as they are. And President Donald Trump said, look, our plane just ain't cutting it.
The plane that you're on right now is almost 40 years old. And when you land and you see Saudi Arabia and you see UAE and you see Qatar and you see all these, and they have these brand new Boeing 747s mostly, and you see ours next to it, this is like a totally different plane. It's much smaller, it's much less impressive as it is. And, you know, we're the United States of America. I believe that we should have the most impressive plane.
And I think a lot of people would agree with that. However, a lot of people don't. And they're still angry about President Donald Trump's plane, which is not President Donald Trump's plane. It's the United States of America's plane. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And Donald Trump said only an idiot would not take advantage of that. And that's what we had in this country for 4 years, an idiot who didn't take advantage of things. And now President Donald Trump is trying to bring us all back to a place of greatness. Speaking of greatness, we have so much other great news that we need to discuss and talk about. And we do it in our second daily podcast, which airs every single day. We do it live. We'll live stream the thing at 1 o'clock. It's called Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. And if you don't want to watch the live stream, that's perfectly fine. We put it up as a podcast so you can download it and enjoy it at your leisure. All you have to do is go to iTunes, go to Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever your podcasts are, your favorite platform, go there and search Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. Download, listen, and enjoy.